Hi, welcome to the Bitter Draft. My name is Phil, and today we're going to be talking about what a deflationary crash looks like. So, if you remember from the last episode, I taught you that the system as it's currently designed is constantly at risk of a deflationary crash unless the Fed continues to print in an accelerating money supply, a dollar supply. You choose my words very carefully. So, important note before we begin, this is technically possible, but it's extremely unlikely for any length of time just because of the way of human nature. This requires the Fed to maintain greater than 0% interest rates during a bank collapse, and they're not going to do it. I mean, Jerome Powell is a product of the banking system. His clients they're not the people, they're the banks. The Federal Reserve is a banking cartel. It's the center of a banking cartel, and they're not going to let the banks fail. And it doesn't help. It doesn't really help anybody. The only people it helps are the weirdos who stuffed cash into their bed during an inflationary period. People who did anything else really don't do very well during a deflationary crash. So the people don't like it. The banks don't like it. The government doesn't like it. He will have no allies if he decides to go a deflationary route. So it is the mirror image of a hyperinflation. Instead of, if you think of a hyperinflation, it's like everything goes crazy and then there's a deflationary crash when everyone realizes the money is fake. This is the exact opposite. There's a complete crash of everything, and then there's a reset of dollars to gold, and then it spikes back up. Right? So graphically, they look like mirror images of each other. So the final result is the same as a hyperinflation, but the journey is different. But I figured for academic fun, let's take a look. So Jerome Powell, he reads some Mises and Rothbard one night, and he has a nightmare, and he's tossing and turning all night, and he wakes up in the morning and he says, "My God, what have I done? This isn't money. I shall never print another dollar again." What will that look like, right? Let me put it this way. He says, "I shall never print another dollar until it is 100% backed by gold." What will this look like? So, first thing that happens is somebody somewhere is unable to maintain a rollover loan. Could be an individual, could be a company, but somebody somewhere, they go into, the lender. The lending bank comes to them and says, "Hey, you got to make your payment." And they say, "We can't do it. Can we roll it over?" And the bank says, "No, we don't, at these interest rates, we don't think you pay back," right? So they default on the loan. Now the bank has depositors, and that loan, they needed that loan to pay back their depositors. So someone comes into the bank and says, "I would like my money out." And the bank says, "We're waiting on a loan, so we can't pay you back." Now, there's a myth that the banks can just create the money. They can create it, but they can't just make it just out of thin air by itself. They can only loan it into existence out of thin air. So the bank could say, "Listen, we don't have your money, but we can loan you some money while you wait for your deposits back at 7%, right? But I don't think that's going to go down very well. So the bank cannot just create money without a loan on the other side of it. It has to have the loan on the other side. So someone somewhere is unable to maintain or roll over the loan. They can't pay it, right? The bank can't pay its depositors back. So now the bank starts to fail, and the FDIC normally comes in and would show up with a bunch of funny money and give everybody monopoly money, and that sets the system right again. However, if the Feds ain't printing the money, the FDIC only has a penny for every loan in existence. So if this gets bad enough, right, if people everywhere if the loans start cracking everywhere, not just in one spot, the FDIC will quickly run out of bailout money, right? So now the banks there's no money, right? There's no more dollars. There's no more dollars being produced. This is critical to a deflation. So the FDIC can no longer cover the loans. The banks start freezing deposits, and that causes a cascading failure of debt. So the depositors say, "Wait a second, the FDIC is not bailing everyone out like we were promised for 50 years." So they all run to the banks to get their dollars out and their whatever else out. And then at the same time, the loans keep going bad, right? So there's less and less loans because people made a bunch of bad investments and can't cover their loans, and the depositors are running out. So this causes a massive bank failure. And it's like a game of musical chairs. When the music stops, everyone rushes for the chairs at the exact same time, right? And there's not nearly enough chairs. I mean, I think people's deposits are loaned out 3, 4, 5 times over, maybe more. So it's not just there's one chair missing. Like if the music stops, there's like 4 or 5 chairs missing for every person or something. It's really bad. There's not going to be enough dollars to cover anything close to what people will need if a deflationary crash happened. So deflation occurs quickly and then lingers, like squeezing water out of a towel. So if you think of a soaking wet towel and you squeeze it, you get half the water out on that first squeeze, and the second squeeze gets another 30% out. And that the last bit is what takes all the labor, right? When you're like to get those last few drops out, and then the towel's still damp on the other side of it. So the deflationary crash that's what happened in 1929. That's extremely scary, and that's why people, the economic textbooks and the economic lessons that were learned, they're the wrong lessons, but the lessons they learned were avoid that at all costs. Which is another reason why I don't think the Powell and the Fed are going to do a deflationary collapse. They're not going to let it happen. The textbooks they were trained on all say do whatever you have to do to not let that happen, because like I said, the big one happens right away, and it's very, very scary. So the hot dollar during the crash, this is very, very important. Doesn't mean the dollars will stay valuable forever, but during the crash, the demand for dollars becomes just white hot. And when I say dollars, I mean paper money, not bank deposits. Because your bank deposit is a promise for dollars. You give you take out a loan, or you deposit your money or deposit your dollars in the bank, and the bank puts that on their balance sheet that they owe you those dollars back. Now, during a crash, you go to get your dollars out, and the bank says, we don't have them, sorry, right? So then what do you have? You have nothing. So the people with cash, this is another reason why it's not going to happen. Like, who's going to benefit from this situation? It's going to be like street musicians, cash-only hot dog vendors, some weird guy in Appalachia that saved all his coins and put them all in his mattress or something, or his bills. I mean, it's going to be like, I don't want to say the bottom rung of society, but it's like the cash people. It's the people that deal mostly in cash, which the system already hates. So they're not going to make these people like filthy, stinking rich at the expense of the bank executives. But anyway, sorry, I'm going off on a side here. So people either scrounge enough cash to pay off loans, or they default, and almost all of them are going to be defaulting. So you're going to be scrounging around for your house to get money for your house loan, but your house value is collapsing, and you probably lost your job. What are you going to do? You're going to default on the house loan. You're going to have to walk away from it, right? So banks and companies fail. Any company that has any sort of credit that needs to roll it over won't be able to get. There's no credit because there's no dollars, right? There's no dollars available. In fact, dollars are being destroyed. This process is very destructive to dollars, except for the paper. It's destructive to all the bank deposits, right? So the banks and companies fails. People start selling their stocks for whatever they can get because they need physical dollars to pay off the loan. Or if their bank is still liquid, they can put it in the bank and then pay off their loans with the bank deposits. But they still need to sell their stocks, and they'll sell them for whatever they can. So the stock market crash of 1929 was caused by a credit crunch, right? Pension funds collapse. 401k and government programs all collapse. So you might say, you're thinking, oh, I'll just live off Social Security because the dollar is becoming white hot. No, the government ain't sending out those checks, right? If you can get your hands on dollars, you'll do very, very well. But you're not going to get your hands on any dollars, right? Your company, if you work for a company, you're either going to get fired, or the company's going to come to you and say, listen, we can't make payroll. Everyone's going to have to take a massive haircut, or we're going to have to start firing people. And by the way, if you find yourself in that situation, take the pay cut. Get everyone to take the pay cut, because you just want to get as many dollars as you possibly can. No matter any which way you can, right? So your house value, price values for all goods, actually including gold and silver, collapse. So You'll watch your house value completely collapse. The price of gold and silver will also completely collapse, which is why it's very dangerous for people who think a hyperinflation is coming to take a leveraged position on gold and silver. They say, "Oh, I'll borrow a ton of dollars, go out and buy a bunch of gold and silver, and when it hyperinflates, I'll just skip I'll just pay it back with worthless money, right? With worthless dollars." Yeah, except if they deflate, even for a temporary period of time, you can be ruined in this period, right? So if silver collapses to under $1, so that the silver dollar is worth more as a dollar again than it is as the silver, right? You could be absolutely find yourself in a ruined position if you owe a ton of dollars in a deleveraging event. All right, let's see. So this is what the average person's view looks like. And I think I said some of this already, but it bears repeating. So all your investments except cash on hand collapse. However, your debt stays right where it is until you pay it off or default. So your house, let's say you have a $400,000 mortgage, right? Your house might collapse. And this is hypothetically going back to, the crash the deflationary crash would go down until there were no more bank loans, and it would just be paper dollars and gold in Fort Knox. So that might be something around, $50 or $100 an ounce of gold. So you can imagine a house might collapse all the way down to, I don't know, $20,000, right? So you have a $400,000 loan on a house that's been revalued to $20,000. Now those $20,000 do buy a lot more than they did. However, your loan is massively, massively underwater. So it makes sense to default in that kind of situation. So if you keep your job and payroll, payroll will have an exceedingly difficult time paying you the full amount. So you'll either be taking pay cuts or layoff. Much more likely, a bunch of people are going to be laid off. I mean, the unemployment rate got very high in the Great Depression. And then anyone you owe dollars to bang on your door. Your landlord is going to be banging on your door. That guy you owe $500 to. And keep in mind, they're banging on your door to get paid because they have their own debts that they need to get paid, right? So even a temporary deflation can be absolutely ruinous. Let's see. So despite collapsing in dollar terms, gold and silver will be used for money for everything except paying off debt, right? The dollar becomes so important to pay off whatever debts exist that you're not going to use a dollar to go buy something. You're going to try and use gold and silver because you're like, I gotta pay my mortgage off or something else. So if you have a car loan but you're renting, you might try and pay your renter. You might try and pay your landlord with silver or gold, right? And at the end of the debt collapse, after the last loan is defaulted on or paid off, gold will be revalued to whatever the amount of gold over paper dollars is, and then the price signal will reset. Like I said, so if you think of it graphically, the market collapses and then hyperinflates back up. Not necessarily hyperinflation, but it'll pop back up to whatever the amount of gold over paper dollars is, and that white hot press on the dollar goes away. That evaporates after the last loan is paid off because people don't need it to pay off their loans anymore. So that white hot burn goes away. And then the system stabilizes and the price signal resets, and people look at the ruined ashes of civilization and rebuild from there. Let's see. Anything else I want to talk about on this one? No, we can go to the next slide. So concluding thoughts, the Fed can save the day at any point by going into a hyperinflation in this crash. So Fed, you can see Jerome Powell here with this suggestive spreading of his monetary seed everywhere. He can come in and save the day by just going burr with the money printer. But that just turns it into, at the in-game scenario, it turns into a hyperinflation. Now, building up into the in-game before the debt reaches that critical vertical point, it's just keeping the system going. But once the debt goes vertical, which it is doing right now, that the saving the day just turns it into a hyperinflation. And so the scenario that I talked about, as I just said, is extremely unlikely. It's not going to happen. Even if Powell was determined, he would probably be Epsteined because he would be ruining some of the most powerful people on Earth who are expecting that money to be, those dollars to be printed. Not that money, because gold is money, but there are people who are expecting those dollars to be printed. And if he doesn't print them, every single bank in the world is going to go bankrupt very quickly, and then all the companies are going to crash. The government's going to be bankrupt. There won't be any Social Security. There won't be Medicaid. The entire system would run out of liquidity and collapse. And like I said, the textbook answer is wrong, but the textbook answer that almost all economists learn is that you stop a deflation by printing dollars. Now, this is just like, if a doctor walks in on a patient, he's on the floor shivering, and he's a meth addict and he's going into withdrawal. The doctor, looks at his pad and says, "My goodness, this man needs some meth. Get him some stat." That's a bad diagnosis. Or maybe that's a bad prescription, right? Maybe the diagnosis is correct that he is going through meth withdrawal, but the solution is not to jack him back up on meth, right? Because then he's going to hyperinflate and his heart's going to explode. So, but we live in the world we live in, and I'm just one man on Rumble. So the scenario is extremely unlikely. The other scenario is just as bad. A hyperinflation and a deflationary crash are mirror images of each other. But the result is the same, and everyone ends up broke. There are different winners and losers slightly. So, like I said, the winners in the deflationary crash are like street musicians and people hoarding cash. That's not going to happen because they have no clout in DC. The winners in a hyperinflation are bank executives. So it's much more likely it's going to be a hyperinflationary crash. So now, that said, the only thing I can think of is they might temporarily let a deflation occur just so they can come in and save the day, because it's pretty easy to see this is the end of the dollar. So Jerome Powell will probably need an excuse to come in with the amount of dollars he's going to have to come in with, which is going to be, it's going to blow your mind, the amount of dollars they're about to print. So they might let things start to get bad so they can come in and save the day. So then you are talking about if they do that. Now, I don't think they will, but I think they might. I think it could happen. I don't think they'll let it happen at all, because even like I said, it's like squeezing a towel. Most of it happens right away. So you're talking about 50 to 80% of banks collapsing in a month, maybe, right? I don't think the Fed I don't think Jerome Powell has the spine, the intestinal fortitude to let something like that happen. But they might. If you are worried about a temporary deflation, especially if you have leveraged investment positions, you might want to hoard some cash to be able to pay those off, for a couple months. That's your decision. I can't make a decision like that for you. But that would be the solution to a deflationary crash, is to hoard paper dollars. Okay, so next week, that's the end for this episode. Next week, we'll talk about what a hyperinflation looks like, which is much more common. I think the only example anyone can think of a deflationary crash is the Great Depression. So we'll have to look into, but we have a lot more examples of hyperinflations that we can point to. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great day.